this week we're going to wander with St. John Neumann, who lived from 1811 to 1860. His feast day is January 5th, and he's the patron saint of Catholic education. Sometimes life can seem so difficult that we just can't see a way to make it better. Hard classes in school can really discourage us and even make us feel stupid. There are times when even our family situations get us down, and we wonder if there really is a place in the world where we can be useful and happy. Those are terrible feelings, aren't they? If you've ever felt discouraged about your future because of the way your life is now, don't be. One of the lessons that the stories of the saints teach us is that absolutely no one has a perfect life. Every one of the men and women you read about in this book faced hard times, limitations, and suffering. But every one of them was able to do good and even great things anyway. And more important, every one of them found that God's love lifted them right out of discouragement and gave them more peace and joy than they'd ever known. If anyone had a right to be discouraged, it was the young man who stood on the deck of a ship on a chilly afternoon in 1836, looking out at America for the very first time. He shivered in his thin clothes. His head was bare because his hat had been stolen on the journey. He was exhausted from 6 weeks at sea on this uncomfortable ship. The young man was poor and had purchased the cheapest ticket available to him. A cheap ticket didn't even guarantee him a place to sleep on the boat. He slept wherever he could find a place to lay down his straw mattress and pillow. So there he stood, a small man, just over 5 feet tall and not in the best of health, with little money in his pocket, looking out at this land called America, a land that was completely foreign to him. It seems natural that he should be discouraged. But if we move forward about 20 years, we'll see the same man in a different place. He could walk out the door of his home in the middle of a big city and see the results of all his hard work. He helped build almost 100 churches, and almost 80 Catholic schools existed because of his work. Would you say this man was a leader? This man's name was John Neumann, and he's one of the most amazing bishops we've ever had in the United States. That's why he was one of the first American citizens to be canonized a saint by the Catholic Church. John was born in Bohemia, now part of the Czech Republic, and studied for the priesthood there. He couldn't be ordained in his own country, though, because they already had enough priests. So John decided to come to America. He knew that the Catholics there didn't have many priests at all. He knew that the churches in some towns had to wait for weeks at a time for a priest to come celebrate Mass. When John heard about these people in need, he couldn't think of one good reason not to help. John arrived in America with almost nothing. When he got off the boat, he went straight to the Archbishop of New York. The Archbishop was expecting him and agreed to ordain John a priest. Soon after he was ordained, John was sent up to the northern part of New York State, around Buffalo. It was wild country up there in those days. Most people didn't live in towns. They lived on farms or scattered throughout the woods. There was one other priest in the area John was to serve. That meant there were just 2 priests for hundreds of Catholics that were spread out all over the land. Father John had a lot of work to do. Fortunately, Father John was very talented, and his talents were going to come in handy out there in the wilderness. He'd been a very good student. He was especially interested in studying botany, or plants, and astronomy, stars. When you're trying to find your way all alone in the woods, it's good to know a lot about both of these things. It's also useful to know different languages. The people Father John served had come from Germany, Ireland, France, and Scotland. It's a good thing that Father John knew 8 different languages. Besides the Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, he knew for his religious studies. For many years, Father John served Catholic in the thinly settled lands of New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. By 1852, he had done such a wonderful job that he was asked to become the Archbishop of Philadelphia, a very important city. John Neumann was the Archbishop of Philadelphia for only 8 years before he died suddenly while taking a walk down a downtown street. But during those years, he accomplished so much that it would make you tired to even think about it. In 1852, there were 2 Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. When Archbishop Neumann died in 1860, there were 100 schools. He wrote catechisms or books of religious instruction that were very popular. He wrote newspaper articles. He encouraged parishes to pray before Jesus in the Eucharist in a special service called the 40 Hours Devotion. It was a way for everyone to stay focused on Jesus and be strengthened by him. It was a sad day in Philadelphia when the news spread that Archbishop Neumann had passed away. The Catholics of the city had seen wonderful changes because of his leadership. They had more places to pray, and their children had more schools where they could learn about Jesus. Who could have imagined that poor young man who had traveled across the ocean to come to this new strange land would have accomplished so much? Who knew that under those shabby clothes was a heart filled with Jesus' love, ready to share it without thinking twice? St. John Neumann overcame many obstacles to do great work for Jesus. Think about the parts of your life that discourage you sometimes. What are they? Have you ever prayed and asked God to help you overcome them?